Hey folks, and welcome to the Daily Ratings Podcast. It's a show where each week we're going to be sitting down with Vincent Daly to get his thoughts on the latest movies he's been watching, both older films and new releases. And don't worry, there's no spoilers. Vince will give a brief review of the movie, share some thoughts, and of course, then rate the film. The daily ratings are always fair, honest, and most importantly, they're consistent. And on today's show, Vince will be rating and reviewing. We have 2012's Prometheus, directed by Ridley Scott, 2017's Alien Covenant, directed by Ridley Scott, and newly released now in theaters, we have Alien Romulus, directed by Fede Alvarez. So we got it's an Alien week, folks. Let's get into these, I don't know. Let's just get into these, see what Vin has to say about them. Stay tuned and enjoy the show. Mr. Vincent Daly, how's it going over
Tommy
there, buddy?
boy, how's it going?
It's going okay. I couldn't even come up with something smart.
Yeah,
Because it's an alien. We are doing aliens.
Bioengineered week.
This Prometheus really isn't an alien movie.
Sure. Yeah. Maybe I don't know. Bioweapon week, xenomorph week. I don't know.
Xeno week.
Xeno week. All right. I don't know. That might imply something else. But.
How was the week? How was your week of movies?
Well, Tom, you know when I get kind of dug in on a word when I'm writing reviews, and the word this week was conflicted.
Okay.
Very, very conflicted.
That's okay.
These type of weeks I think are hard for me to write about because I care so much for the Alien series.
Yeah, you are a big alien guy.
Yeah, I'm just too in the weeds. I care too much. I think within a review, that means I almost have endless things to say that I have to dial back. I don't know how successful I am at that. It's kind of a lifelong problem of me being long-winded. Also, my opinions on all three of these films are such a mixed bag that it's hard to spit out a single score. I found for each of these things that I love, things that I hate, and anywhere in between, and somewhere in between, fan appreciation, of course. And I just found it very difficult to really just spit out one score that I'm happy with. I found myself going back for all three of these multiple times and changing the scores,
And just couldn't really land on one.
Yeah, I just could not. So each of these three movies have moments that are dreams come true for sci-fi horror visuals, and all three have also very frustrating moments as well that kind of challenged me to see beyond my love as a fan for these.
And you really are. Like Vin, folks, so everyone, if you're familiar at all with the podcast, how much of a horror fan, how much of a sci-fi fan, how much you saw Alien pretty young, correct?
Oh, yeah.
Like this has been a love of yours for a long time.
Yeah, absolutely.
Did you see Alien first, or was it Aliens that got you hooked? Was it?
It's actually Predator that got me hooked. I saw Predator first, and then I'll mention it in our Prometheus review, but AVP was something as a kid that was definitely kind of a guilty pleasure.
That because we were at the perfect age where that was actually maybe a fun movie.
Absolutely.
And now you watch it and it's just like, okay, can we not count this as canon in the Alien universe, please?
Yeah. Absolutely. I also was obsessed with getting a real Predator suit for a time in my childhood, like before cosplay was a thing. And I just remember it being like $6,000.
Oh, yeah.
I was like, I'm never going to afford this. It's just...
Well, I'll tell you what, we saw some good ones at some Comic-Cons that we went to together.
Yeah.
Some really good Predators.
Absolutely.
I remember one specific one. I remember one because you have to be in New York Comic-Con, you have to be in the common area. You can't be on the show floor.
Yeah.
And we were just walking by, and this really incredible looking Predator was gingerly walking down the steps, and somebody was holding his hand to help him. And I'm like, this is the least scariest thing in the world.
Yeah.
So my prep for this week. So back in February, I had gone through all of them except for Alien 4, which is what's it called? Alien
Resurrection.
Correct. I fell asleep during it, and I never just got back to it.
Fair.
So for this week, I went back and I watched all of them again.
Wait, including the original 4?
Except for 3. Yeah.
Wow.
Everything,
okay.
yeah.
Wow. Outdid me. That's fantastic.
Well, I never had a love for these films. And in fact, I never really even seen these up until February.
Sure.
So I think I watched... Yes. So I watched Alien and Aliens, and so we got something. 3 and 4 that I fell asleep to. And today, of course, we're going to get into the
prequels, and this. I mean, technically, Romulus is really a prequel as well. So,
oh, it was great too. I was even online looking at the correct timelines of everything.
Oh,
to
yeah?
get myself redone, or to get myself just honed in a little bit of where we are, where I can picture where we are on the timeline.
Sure.
But basically, Prometheus is very almost close to present day.
Yeah,
It's a little bit further
I think
than
it's
that,
like
but
2093 or something like that.
Yeah. So we have Prometheus, then we have Alien Covenant. This was supposed to be what was called the David trilogy, but now the next one that came out, which is now Alien Romulus, kind of bucked that trend, and now we're post-Alien.
Yeah.
I mean, who knows what's happening?
I definitely have some notes on, I wouldn't exactly call it a fumble, but the potential of what Ridley Scott wanted to lay down with these prequel movies in the 2010s.
Yeah.
For the most part, I think the good news with Romulus is that it's kind of breaking away from that. There's, of course, a subtle nods, which we'll get into, to Prometheus and Alien Covenant. But I think that's the best thing that Romulus has going for it, that it's just breaking away from the minutia, the getting tangled in the wires of like, how do we write a backstory to this slasher franchise?
My only thing is that if Ridley Scott had an idea of a trilogy, and maybe because he's getting older now and can only do so many projects at a time or something like that, it's just, if he had a vision for 3 films, I wish he could just make the 3 films.
Fair.
Like, for instance, I think this third prequel Aliens film still has life.
Yeah.
You know, Prometheus, Alien Covenant. I still think he might pick something up then.
Sure.
And finish that trilogy.
He's got like 9 projects in the pipeline.
Well, there's a show coming out too.
Yes.
There's an Alien show in the works.
Yep.
And so I think Ridley's, again, because of his age, I think he's going to start rubber stamping things. And my only thing with this trilogy, and we'll get into it, what we actually think about it, or this, what might be a trilogy, it's the guy's vision, so I would just like to see it
play out.
Just finalize it, get that David trilogy done,
Sure.
and then we can and now we just have a cornucopia of plot points in this timeline that we touch on, and we have the show, and then we have Romulus, and yada yada.
Absolutely.
Any opening notes or?
Well, I mean, just that, again, conflicted is the word, and I would say the alternate title for this week's episode is Androids Get It Done.
Okay.
So.
Well, we're going to jump back to 2012, and this is the first, because the 4th Alien movie came out in 98, 97, 98, something like that.
I think so.
And then there were 2 AVPs, Alien vs. Predator. So 2012, we have Prometheus come out, and why don't you set up the purpose of this film? Kind of what's our storyline, and we'll take it back and forth then.
Yeah. Well, I really do want to start with kind of jumping back to the climate of the Alien franchise in 2012. The last of the 4 original Alien films wrapped up in 97, and the 2000s were primarily familiar with the Xenomorph through the AVP spin-off movies, and unfortunately they really are, or maybe fortunately, they are just spin-off movies. There's no tie, there's no homework you have to do to watch those. I won't lie, like I said, I have a soft spot for that first Alien vs. Predator movie because as a kid I was a huge Predator fan, and those movies just play out very biased for a boy with dreadlocks. It's definitely, it's not taking in the lethality of the Xenomorph in those movies. But like many trashy horror sequels kicked off and kicked to shreds of their own franchise, Alien was in need of a big makeover, at least in the eyes of our, original creator, Ridley Scott. Folks, of course, to save some of my hot takes for when we cover the original movies, but a key piece to understanding the Alien series is no one knows what the they're making. From creator to creator, things fluctuate wildly of what's going on with this franchise. And while the sci-fi design of the world has been something that Ridley Scott has overseen for some time, Prometheus marks a huge turn in trying to solidify the many loose ends of the series. The most obvious is the film's attempt to be a prequel with big philosophical aspirations and sowing the seeds of two narrative lines, one telling the story of the engineers and the other connecting the dots for the franchise we know with the Xenomorph. But much like we see with Ridley's other resurrected IP, Blade Runner, there is a big push into expanded media for this. For this era of Aliens, a total of 14 short films were made as supplemental watching for this.
14?
Yeah. Huge. All mostly in an attempt to weave together a story that will crack under its creator's aspirations. Prometheus is a heady sci-fi that twists into a much dumber horror slasher than it lets on to be. We follow a corporate-funded space mission led by archaeologists discovering star coordinates that may lead to our very creators themselves. Landing on the planet, our crew comes across a familiar scene, an alien chamber that blends metal and organics in a nightmarish design. If you asked watching those original movies, hey, what's with that crazy alien dude in the chair? This movie's for you. And I don't think it's a question that many asked, but nonetheless, Ridley's here to answer it. The engineers are introduced from the get-go, and in addition to looking like giant, bald, albino humans, I guess that's the best kind of description for them, they are too intelligent for their own good, developing a bioweapon that leads to their own destruction. With the series staple like the Xenomorph and Facehugger suspiciously missing, we see evil black goo become the volatile threat, mutating chaotically and seemingly unstoppable by both human and alien alike. This movie tries a lot. I don't know. What are your overall thoughts on this one, Tom?
I didn't love it when it came out, and I was definitely more confused about the whole genre.
Sure.
But if you're going to start with the movie, hey, chronologically, this is the one to start with.
Right.
So I was just confused by the whole thing. Didn't quite get it. Didn't like the acting or the writing or the casting back when we first watched it. I've now watched it twice this year, and I don't like the writing. I don't like the casting. I'm less confused about it, and I can appreciate what he was trying to do.
Right.
I just don't think it was conveyed to the audience well. I think even you giving the description of the film, which is good, I think people are going to be confused still.
Yeah, sure, absolutely. I think the movie's confused about what it wants.
Because it's an alien movie, but it's not an alien movie at all.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's people call it an origin story, which I like, but it's not even about really quite the origin story of the alien.
Yeah. It's almost an origin story for Alien Covenant, you know?
Right.
And that's where I think you have a good point in bringing up the aspect of, I mean, Ridley clearly was trying to do his own thing with this.
Yeah.
It would have been interesting to see that play out a little bit more deliberately than even by the time with Alien Covenant, which we'll touch on in a second. There's a stumble there in the plan, in the intended plan of this.
And I have to say, it's just that I like the idea of an origin story to see, okay, where did it all start? Because when we kick off with Aliens and all the other ones, we just keep on moving further in the future. And it's like, well, how did we get to this point? It would be great to hear a little bit about, what happened here? How did we get to the point to reach Alien? And I just think it was so focused on, as you say, the engineers of basically humans. I would have liked it more so start with the company. Because it's not it is a company film, but it's not the company film.
Sure.
Or was it Wayland Company?
Yeah, Weyland-Yutani.
I just think because it's so focused on the human aspect, the alien aspect gets lost, and I just think other things get lost in that.
Sure. Because the film is really trying to juggle quite a lot.
It is. It's trying to tell you a lot.
Yeah, absolutely.
For sure.
Yeah,
so that's my overall thing. After first viewing it, when it first came out in theaters, I remember you being so excited.
Yeah.
My thoughts kind of last.
Yeah.
Even though it being more now connected to the whole franchise.
Absolutely. I think I was a lot more angry upon first seeing this.
You were sad.
Yeah.
Because Vin was just like, it's really, you were so, yeah.
I was pumped. But it was, it's something that I've kind of just softened on because I feel like I can appreciate what's attempting to be done. I think I just kind of softened on what we're kind of just
what we're here
stabs
for,
in
really.
the gut for me,
okay.
Yeah. The loss of potential. But I think the most interesting quality of the story is the space it explores between science and faith, because it's weaved into almost every ounce of the film. The premise is a little heavy-handed in this regard. I think between all the different creation mythos and open discussion about every character's motivation on the journey, it's a bit too spelled out for me. It also provides a convenient excuse for when characters act illogically out of nowhere, especially in one infamous scene that I'll simply call the rolling donut. And if you've been online at all for the last 12 years, you know what the rolling donut is when it comes to Prometheus. But folks, if these next two movies are about anything, it is about Michael Fassbender's character, David. In addition to being the best performance of the film, this android synth character benefits from this lens over the story. Characters might have a tough, logical exterior acting in Wayland's corporate interest or for pursuit of science, but when threatened with something designed to kill, that rationalism goes out the window, and guess what? They're in a slasher movie. They need to die. They're just fodder for the slasher. This isn't the case for David, and rather than revealing his synthetic nature to be a twist towards the end like we see in previous films, Ridley leans into this and stumbles upon an interesting storytelling around this character. I feel like David is placed directly in the middle of this science versus faith type of angle that the film tries to achieve. Again, it's really trying to be like a lofty, heady sci-fi masterpiece, if anything, a Kubrick-style sci-fi movie. I feel like Ridley stumbles by the end when he realizes, oh, that's right, I just got to kill everyone with a, with either a xenomorph or evil black goo.
Yeah.
So
I guess I'll let you roll with it a little bit.
Well, really, the next thing I want to talk about is just a big cast on this bad boy.
Yes.
It's an unusually weighty cast. Both the talent pool, but also the size of the crew. That size of the crew is what I think is the downfall later on in the runtime. Almost everyone is a letdown from underutilizing them, especially in the more prestige casting choices. Noomi Rapace, Idris Elba, Charlize Theron, all are a big waste, with frustrating simple characters that chalk up to be no better than the rest of the crew fodder when the killings have to come. As for the unimportant crew members, they're still filled with some solid B-tier actors here. But are used in such a predictable, expendable, and most importantly, stupid way that it really dumbs down the entire experience. If I'm driving anything home with Prometheus, is that Ridley Scott wanting to write something so intellectually heavy is betrayed by its own genre being a sci-fi slasher movie. This all boils down to one scene for me, where a crew member that has died from acid blood, not anything else, he's just died from some acid on his face, turns into some sort of rage zombie werewolf specifically designed for plot reasons to cut down the many nameless members of the cast so that we can get down to the usual handful of characters that we deal with at the end of these movies. It's absolutely the gripe I've had with the film from the moment I saw it the first time. This scene, it feels so manipulative. It feels so like, wait, there's no logic to why this character is adding to the killings or adding to the panic of things. Worst of all, this manipulated bullshit is back-to-back with one of the best scenes of the whole franchise, no less in this film, around a nightmare siege section at the hands of an auto-doctor droid. Really, I love this scene with Noomi Rapace. I feel like this scene has like everything I want.
This is probably the most tense scene in the film, just about,
It's scary in so many ways, most notably scary for the technology angle, which is a nuance that isn't always driven home, but always a background factor in these movies, and something I'm actually excited that Romulus really leaned into, like the fear of technology being almost equal to the fear of the alien itself.
Yeah.
Sadly, these moments all fall under just strictly bad writing and even more confused messaging when side by side with all the philosophical babble Ridley seems to be obsessed with in this film. I don't know. Is there any standouts besides Michael Fassbender for you, or was he even a letdown?
No, definitely not. I think he was like the one good character, and I was actively angry towards a lot of characters here. I think Charlize Theron, I just like, again, a lot I think has to do with the writing, and even the writing team is kind of a big writing team.
Yeah.
I mean, the one guy did do both Dune movies, which, well, actually, I did have some problems with the writing on Dune too, But anyway, like Charlize Theron, I really didn't like her in this film at all.
Yeah.
Idris Elba, it's not only do we need to have generic characters, stereotypical characters, the way they're done, the way they're written, and then the way they're acted, all of it feels like B-movie quality to me.
Yeah.
We have this huge cast with big names, and it just doesn't work. Even Sean Harris, who might not be a household name, he plays the bad guy in 2 Mission Impossible.
Yes.
Like he's the bad guy in
Yep.
Fallout. He just plays...
He's the rage zombie werewolf.
Well, he's also... he's just like... When you first introduced to him, you think he's just he's like the muscle, or he's like the geologist.
Yeah, yeah.
And it's like, this character is not a geologist. This is the most absurd thing I've ever seen. And it left even the main scientist guy, who was Numi Rapace's husband.
Yes, yep.
I think just horribly casted. Horribly casted for this, what's supposed to be archaeologist / scientist / it's like this guy.
And the leaders, no less, of this expedition.
Totally, the matching isn't there.
Yeah.
And that's why I said the casting just feels so off. And then when you present it in a light that's stereotypical writing, the whole thing is hurt. The whole thing is hurt.
And I think the more heady aspirations of the film, what it's trying to unpack with creation and faith and science and all this stuff and bioengineering.
Yeah. It's like adorable.
Right.
Nice
It's just like, okay, well, what good is that when everyone's going to die? You know what I mean? Like, what good is that when the slasher is the genre that it's packaged up in?
Yeah, but the thing is, if it wants to be a little bit more heady and philosophical, it can be.
Sure.
They just decided not to do it.
Yeah.
That's the thing. Like, I'm not... Listen, this could be elevated to much more than just a slasher.
Yeah.
But with how it's just... It just fails on so many levels, in my opinion.
Yeah,
It's just so unimpressive.
Absolutely. Sci-fi design-wise, this is the furthest detour we see from the kind of used future aesthetic, which once again, when we cover the original Aliens, will be something I really drill home. But it's slowly, kind of reincorporated the more and more we get further into these next 2 films, especially for Romulus. This comes with heavy neon yellows almost on every device, but, really doesn't look bad. More so just forgettable in that early 2010s kind of way. As a positive, holograms also are presented with this like intentional static look that probably is the closest we get to that used future aesthetic. It's still kind of spotty in areas, even though this is like way beyond any technology that we've seen in like the mainline films, but a little bit of an approach there. But mostly Ridley Scott seems to be trying to do his own thing in these next 2 films to separate from it, where with Romulus, we definitely kind of see like a Renaissance approach to getting the used future look nailed down to again, and maybe even revitalizing it, whether that be through staticky CRT screens, rattling kind of fans on the space station, coolant pipes everywhere. That's what I love about the original film so much, of what it's able to capture. And
It has a Matrix griminess to it, and almost a steampunkish element.
Absolutely.
And just the funniest thing is, this is technically, again, as far as the timeline of this story goes, this is the earliest film in the timeline, and it looks more futuristic than anything else we get in the future of the franchise.
Right. And where I kind of have an issue with it, but yeah.
It's a good point.
There is one specific thing I want to throw to you, Tom. You have an interesting perspective watching this, having tackled Lawrence of Arabia recently. Was there any substance to David loving the movie, or is it just for the birds? What are your thoughts there?
There is. I can see that there's substance to the movie.
Oh,
a little
really?
bit.
Okay.
How about this? You can even take it to the point where how much of Dune I was seeing in Lawrence of Arabia, the anti-hero god aspect.
Okay, yeah.
To it, you know what I mean?
Sure. Just like the foundations in what story it's trying to tell.
Yes.
Okay.
I don't know how much I want to say, but basically, I very much like in David's character, the one good character that we can like.
Yeah.
That god complex, essentially.
Sure, absolutely. Overall, though, folks, from my perspective, it seemed like Ridley Scott wanted to make a Kubrick-scale sci-fi masterpiece with this, and I can respect the effort there. You, of course, get a lot of these vibes once again in David's character and how an android is used in the storytelling with so many of these themes. But much like something like Matrix Reloaded, for instance, in wanting to make something smart and overtly smart, you kind of make it dumb. And by not developing the story in a genre to match that new focus, it creates a poor foundation of what the film will ultimately become. Alien is a universe that can juggle a lot of concepts between dystopian capitalism and existential dread, but when your movie has to pay off with being a slasher, these finer details might not matter as much as you think they do. With that said, we're going to go ahead and give Prometheus 2012 a 44.
That's such a bad score.
Ridley. And again, I conflicted is the word. I saw a 54. I saw a 34.
Yeah.
It
all depends which part you're really thinking about when you think back to it.
Bingo. I think back to the C-section scene with the auto doctor. I think some of the best moments in the entire series. And then, other moments like the rolling donut make me say, why? Why at all?
It's 44 is hilarious.
Yeah.
And my apologies to you, really, because it really cuts it a little bit deeper for you.
There's a disappointment.
Exactly.
Here.
Me, I just don't think it's all that great of a movie. I can appreciate what he's trying to do with it. I think he fails on a lot of levels. My big three takeaways are the acting, the too much. He's trying to do too much, and I guess the writing, but it's just not that good of a movie. Oh, I'm sorry. How not competent any of the characters are.
Oh, yes.
I mean, sure, maybe
and that relates to the writing, to your point.
Correct, yeah, because it's just everyone is an idiot.
Yes.
Everybody is an idiot, for maybe the exception of one or two, but really we should have more than that.
Yeah.
And we can talk about that in some other films in the Alien franchise that, you can have several competent characters.
Absolutely.
It's the fact that the xenomorphs are the perfect organism that still they get you in the end.
Absolutely. I think that's the magic of those original films is that it's not that they fall into the xenomorphs trap because they're stupid. It's because it's almost a match that they need to pull out every stop to overcome this alien.
And that's what can make it believable. That's what makes you feel stakes when you're sitting there in the seats.
Yep.
This doesn't have that.
Yep.
And I'll just, one more touch, I don't know, because I felt like I didn't get it out great, but I just don't like how... It's a good point to say he's trying to do too much. But again, I'm okay with an origin story, but I would rather you start with the company or have a heavier hand in the guy who formed the company and reasons of that, his coming of age story, how he got to it. It's just that we're thrown into an already developed story a little bit, but then we're also taking it back to the creation of humans. And it's too much. We're taking too many leaps.
Yeah,
you know what
absolutely.
I mean? And it's just 44%. I like it. I'm kind of shocked that it's below 50, but
listen, like I said,
I think it should be below 50.
I think I had definitively 3 scores for all 3 of these movies. So
going back now, my friend.
Yeah, it's cemented. It's put in a print.
All right, let's keep it going then, because 5 years later, we're now in 2017. Oh, by the way, I didn't even realize Prometheus was rated R.
Oh,
it could easily be rated PG-13, in my opinion.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah. Just saying.
I never even considered it, but just because chest bursting.
Yeah, no, for sure. But even this next film, Alien Covenant, rated R, again, I was just like, this could easily be rated PG-13, in my opinion. Alien Covenant came out 5 years later. I don't even know if I was aware that this came out when it came out. I mean, truly, I'm not even sure this was on my radar at all.
Yep.
But again, I saw it 2 years. I've saw it twice in this year now.
That's unreal.
And I'll just say this. I went from hating this film and thinking that it's just low-budget sci-fi film to at least understanding why it exists a little bit more.
Oh, interesting. Well, I went from liking this film to hating it.
Excellent. So. With that, just tell what it's about and then get into it.
This is a tough rewatch for me, Tom, because like I opened the episode, very conflicted. Rewatching movies for the podcast is a little bit of a game of trying to see what my original thoughts were, especially for anything related pre-podcast. Here, I just don't know what I saw to have a positive. I thought this was easily going to be the best of the week, and if anything, excited to revisit it. This is also an extremely difficult movie to stay away from spoilers on. I was instantly reminded of the challenge I had in our Jurassic Park episode in reviewing JW2, where the film flips on its head a little bit over halfway into the film, halfway through the story. And it makes the story difficult to summarize and issues with the film kind of impossible to unpack without spoilers.
We got to stay a little broad on this one for sure.
Exactly. Just know that, like JW2, if anything, I think it really is, it struck that same quality of just like halfway through, kind of becomes a different story altogether, kind of becomes a different genre even in ways of a movie. Originally, when this came out, I was a bit salty on what could have been and the potential left on the cutting room floor. Like I mentioned, Ridley Scott had big plans for the franchise in the 2010s. Prometheus would have had its own line of sequels, with the tentative sequel named Paradise Lost, while simultaneously there would be more mainline Alien movies, either done as light prequels or even rewriting the series by placing stories in between the original four, specifically in an attempt to rewrite 3 and Resurrection.
That would make sense to fill in that gap a little bit there.
Fill in that gap.
There is a story to be told there.
Sure. I think there's a story to be told in in between each of these, just because like cryosleep is a reality that like 80 years pass, and like it's like, all right, well, what happened in 80 years?
Right.
And like just like human society in general. But one of the most interesting ideas to come out of this was ultimately what became of this film. In tradition of giving the IP to new visionary directors, Neil Blomkamp was tapped on the shoulders to direct a project simply called Alien 5. While we've commented plenty on Blomkamp's career, especially in the disappointment going from sci-fi golden boy to generic studio plug, flashing back to 2015, he was at the height of his potential. I often wonder if all the work put into the now canceled Alien 5 somehow made its way into the short films he helmed for Oates Studios. But in reality, we know very little of what was planned on that side of the series, and only that all plans were combined and converged into what we get in 2017 with Alien Covenant.
Jeez. This is what we get from all that, huh?
Yeah.
It's a shame.
Right. In that, you can kind of see that it's burdened with being a sequel to Prometheus, and it's also burdened with being just another Alien movie.
Right.
And, cool concepts there, but it is kind of just another Alien movie at parts. Alien Covenant feels like the reverse of what we got with Prometheus, starting out as a sci-fi slasher and then twisting more into a heady story. It also is a direct sequel to Prometheus, so you kind of can't see one without the other. These two are definitely a pair. I don't feel like you get a really good picture of what Ridley Scott was going for without these two, especially in that second half of where things go. The sci-fi backbone of the story is a bit more traditional, putting us on a colony ship carrying countless cryo-frozen passengers designed to populate a new planet. After complications in transit, the crew makes a desperate detour to investigate a mysterious transmission and find an even more mysterious planetary environment perfectly suitable for their colony. And the questions don't stop there. As landing on the planet, they find wheat crops, signs of humanoid civilization, and a scene we are all too familiar with. Architecture that meshes metal and organic into one. Discovering these ruins will shockingly be the least of their problems, because this planet has one survivor with devilish plans clawing their way towards hatching. I would say that's the best I can do. I mean, without spoilers. How's that as a summary? Okay.
Absolutely.
That gets it done. All right. I really struggled with it because it's just like, I don't know, what's the fine line here? Michael Fassbender reprises his role as an android of the same model as David in the last film, but is able to make the performance kind of take it in a different direction with his new character, Walter. And once again, kind of steals the show for me. I'll compare this to Star Trek again in a second, but Walter strikes a logical balance for iconic characters like Spock or Data, especially in this like shell of that's like a colony ship, and they kind of have to problem solve on if they go down to the planet and what they do on the planet while they're down there. Interstellar is also a great kind of a great comparison to that, of like that feels like a Trekkie type of shell to it. Having an unwavering rational character thrown into the sheer panic that will unravel in the story, I feel like is an interesting element that I enjoyed. It also further shows that Ridley has more interest in writing a heady sci-fi about robotics and Asimov-type theming than making a good sequel to his space slasher. He just wants to do something different, which makes me say, like, yeah, I do wish, in those original plans, this was the movie in the Prometheus specific line, and that we would maybe get a third in the Prometheus specific line.
Right. Yeah.
I think in that context as well, this strikes a better balance of what Prometheus was trying to pull off as well. I don't know. What are your thoughts there as far as the more intellectual sides of this?
I think if you watch these individually, they're worse films without really having them. Like, they need to be paired in order for them to make them better. But just because they're better doesn't mean that they're good yet. And I do think the naming doesn't help to just go and name this Alien Covenant. I just think even changing the name to something closer to Prometheus, go down that route.
Sure.
I just, even just for audience sake, would bundle these two better together.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Like I said, though, and like I'll say probably a dozen more times, very conflicted on this rewatch, so let me get two gripes out of the way. I think what I like about this film, once again, is how Star Trek-y it feels. This premise of trouble on the ship forces them to go down to the planet is a solid plot structure. I like the early conflict within the crew around varying from the mission, and, it's something that kind of confronts something we all know of, like, well, clearly, why are you going down to what's going to be the demise of the ship? We all know it's going to end up bad for them. But at the same time, so much of the crew, and I mean like so much of the crew, really, really act stupid for trained explorers of a planet. This is supposed to be a crack team for a colonization effort. This would be us colonizing Mars. Who would be sending on a first wave of that.
Yep.
Previously in the series, the crew has been fodder for the xenomorph in various ways, usually resulting as a panic. There's probably no better example than Bill Paxton himself yelling "Game over, man" in the second film.
We're cooked, man.
Yeah, we're cooked.
Game over, man. Bill Paxton is so great.
I don't know. I haven't watched the second one in a while, so maybe he loses some buttons as well. All the Twisters.
I don't know, man. Can I ask you a quick question?
Yeah.
So the fact that we still are dealing with super incompetent characters in this.
I think that's what hurt this rewatch so much. I was like, wait, it's still a problem?
Right, it's still like writing and everything like that.
Yeah.
Was the blow softened now that we're dealing with not a A-list star cast, A-list or B-list star cast? Like, we have Michael Fassbender, as we said. Billy Crudup, I mean, he's a big face, but he's not a big name.
Yep.
Biggest name is Danny McBride and isn't even in it that much.
Right.
I also don't like that he's in it. I have become a huge fan of Danny McBride.
Oh, okay.
Why is he in the movie? But the fact that you have these crazy incompetent characters, was the blow lightened? The fact that they're not big actors?
I think so. That's a good way to put it. I think it didn't delete the blow.
For sure.
It lightened the blow.
To me, it made me. That's what makes me feel like, this is a Sunday night sci-fi film that with a low budget. Now my expectations are lower.
Interesting.
It takes it from like this is an Alien franchise movie done by Ridley Scott.
Right? Yeah.
Expectations
the guy,
high.
Yeah.
Sci-fi movie on a Sunday night. Okay, now my feet are set.
Interesting. I think that's a healthy perspective to have with this. But I think when it comes to the characters specifically, they just have zero excuses. They have
absolutely
these characters are written as like crack, top notch personnel. The personnel that are woken up when even the slightest thing goes wrong on the ship because they know what to do and no one knows what the to do. There are these mushroom puffs that hold some mutation of the evil black goo from the engineers from the last film. And there's just the most idiotic moments around these. Just like, why would there not be procedure? Why would there not be anything? It strips me out of it so much, off the back of me enjoying the more procedural Star Trek-y qualities to it. I feel like it could be a hard sci-fi for that reason, but it goes out the window for these idiotic actions and idiotic character writing once again. And in that, it really is paired perfectly with Prometheus. The visual design of this film is also a bit confusing. I think it comes from the position in the series. As both a sequel to Prometheus and a prequel to Alien, the near future look to everything may have felt fresh on release. Also, this is kind of coming from like me trying to reverse engineer what I was thinking in my previous positive remembering of this film. But it now barely distinguishes itself from mounted GoPros to normal-ass assault rifles and, frustratingly, zero spacesuits. Again, like, what are our characters doing? Not only does our crew feel hopelessly outmatched for what they're put up against, but it clashes with the high-concept alien design that they come across. I think it's a real shame because I feel a lot of scenes in this, especially when they're coming across engineered-styled ruins. I mean, it looks like a perfect transition from concept art to on-screen set piece in like a really great way, like dream come true type of stuff.
Really?
Yeah.
I wasn't blown away at all.
The scenes, well, I can't go into it too much, but when they're coming across the main ruins of this, the scenes of bodies and panic, I love how deep they go into the faces in the architecture of everything. I feel like that does a lot to extend the visual storytelling of what we know the engineers to be without ever like meeting and having a conversation with the engineers.
Okay.
It shows ego, it shows arrogance, and I feel like that ties into a lot of the, the playing God bioengineering themes of these two films. But the whole crew is just wearing windbreaker rain jackets, and it's just like, no! Like, how can these things be side by side? How can they get it so wrong and so right in one spot? And that really is where like I stand on both of these films.
Wow. Okay. Very interesting.
It's just like, wow, you got it, and then you just don't. I just don't understand. I don't understand. This was really eye-opening watching back-to-back because I remember, once again, liking this movie, but immediately was met with the same bland design and dumb character deaths that I had a problem and hated Prometheus for. But it hit me, and it's about 50 minutes in, this movie transforms. It becomes something else entirely, and it gets a little nuts. It starts breaking into interesting territory for the series and new territory for the series. Much like our new film this week, a little under halfway through this transformation, it's a genre switch up a little bit and almost accelerates through the normal beats of an alien movie. I think a great example of this is how quickly a facehugger progresses. Mm-hmm. You get nabbed,
right.
The next scene, it's going down, which I feel like is a nuanced loss from those original films, that there is a lay in wait.
Yeah, there's a time elapsed.
Yeah. I feel like that's a really key element that is lost on all three of these films. Yes, we all know what the payoff's going to be. Yes, we all know where it's going. So it's almost pointless to say, like, oh, did it really, like, plant the egg?
Right. I mean, we should know. That's a funny observation, especially with this one, because we really are, correct me if I'm wrong, we were just working in a 24-hour period, essentially.
Yeah.
That's really it.
Absolutely.
So things have to move.
Yeah.
Unfortunate things have to move fast.
Absolutely. So I just feel like something is lost there, but where Romulus uses that sped up pacing to create some real estate for nostalgia callbacks, Covenant goes bananas in its sequel role to Prometheus. I feel like that's where this steps up a notch for me, coming off of Prometheus, because it goes in a way that I know I didn't expect when I originally watched it. Mm-hmm. I think even now I was really frustrated in watching this, and that 50-minute mark kind of hits. I'm like, oh, okay, that's right. There were some things. There were some things that I enjoyed here. That's where I'm probably going to have to stop, folks, because it is plainly in spoiler territory and really the main payoff for the audience 2 movies deep into this prequel effort. For my enjoyment, there is an interesting tone created here, a cross between optimistic discovery and sci-fi horror. Even if realistically that tone could come off muddy in its execution, I think that's where you're coming from, Tom, as far as like this B-movie feel to it.
Mm-hmm, yeah.
That it's trying for something more, but ultimately it's the same package. Alien Covenant has shades of Apocalypse Now, more than a little Star Trek influence, and a villainous development that I personally love, but it's equally still a mess and probably left in the dust of the series. With that said, we're going to go ahead and give Alien Covenant 2017 a 59.
Wow, okay, 59%.
Yeah.
So you do like it better. So, I mean, my big takeaway was, again, I watched this for the first time, I really didn't like it. Watched it for a second time, and I went from really liking this less than Prometheus than me liking it just as much as Prometheus. And again,
so they're just neck and neck.
right, which to me, like I said, I thought Prometheus 44%, absolutely right there. Like, these are still not good movies in my mind. My problem with this film, too, it also... the whole point of this 2-hour-long movie is really just to get across one idea. And I can't explore that or anything like that, but we really only need to know one thing about this film, and then that's the film.
Yep.
I think it's a much smaller film. I don't think it's trying to be nearly as heady as Prometheus or anything like that.
Sure.
And that's why I feel smaller. So the job gets done. I think what's trying to be conveyed gets done because it's such a basic thing. And with that, we just get a small movie. The CGI is not good of the creatures. Was not loving the CGI on the rewatch.
Interesting.
Yeah.
I had a problem with the digital copy because I got like a UHD copy and it feels like it was like compressed horizontally on
that's
both
interesting.
of these. On both
Actually,
of these.
that's very interesting.
Yeah.
So I guess, besides same deal, kind of writing generic, characters acting stupid, and then now we're dealing with kind of definitely smaller actors as well. It's much of the same beats as Prometheus, and yet I think on a smaller scale. So in that ways, it fails less, but it can only succeed so far.
Sure.
But for that, I really kind of feel the same way about it as Prometheus. No shoes on it or anything like that. Not going to dub it with that. But 59%, that's a noticeable jump up, though, for you.
Yeah, I think it's... I like what you're saying there as far as kind of aim small, miss small.
Right. Because there is one element. We need to take one thing away from this movie.
Yeah.
And I got to tell you, because this was going to be kind of a trilogy, and this is the middle film, and oftentimes that's when we have our biggest issues, is the middle film. Again, I just look at the concept and I say, boy, you just could have done so much more. But if that's what we did, okay, and we get what we get.
That's also, I think, where the ordering of the plot comes into play, that he almost leads with a hyper-condensed alien movie, 50 minutes. And then after that 50-minute mark, we get back to what he was probably planning to do for a Prometheus sequel, like Paradise Lost or whatever it would have been titled.
Right.
So I think that experience of the flip-flop that Prometheus is heady first, slasher last, it gets the slasher out of the way, so it makes room for the heady side of it. But I feel like that is the clearest example or the clearest representation of that this was an idea for one movie combined with the idea of another.
Right, exactly right, exactly right. Okay, so with that 59%, for whatever reason, if you're jumping around these films or want to watch Alien Covenant, and because you saw Prometheus years ago, do a catch up. Do a 10-minute YouTube review. That way you don't have to go through the whole film.
I think so.
But okay, Vin, with that, let's go ahead and jump in our producer segment, because we do have a producer for today. And we have an old producer coming back and a repeat producer. Glenn and Carol R. wrote back in and donated. They gave a Godfather donation.
Wow, that's huge.
$95 is the Godfather donation.
Thank you so much.
Which is a big deal. So they are Godfathers this week. But they also wrote in a note, Glenn and Carol did, so let's read that. They said, "Greetings, Tom and Vinny. It's been a while since we've made a donation. We're behind a few episodes and have caught up to your current episode 147. We're very happy that you took our advice from producing an episode last year, in that Tom had been watching some of the movies and given an opinion, which has created the fantastic banter between you both compared to the old days of just asking questions."
Weeks like this, you outdid me.
What are you gonna do? They say the Siskel and Ebert comparison in that part is most enjoyable.
Yes.
While you are mostly in agreement between each other, it is also interesting to hear an occasional variance or even exact opposite opinion between each of you that both accept apparently to your close. It is also interesting to hear an occasional variance or even exact opposite opinion between each other that you both accept apparently to your close friendship, but also conveys quite nicely on the air.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Does that set this make sense?
I think so.
Okay. Got caught up there. Sorry. Consequently, Tom's revised rating system, I'm sure, has left some baffled from being listeners from the early days. Yeah, well, it comes with the territory, I guess. I don't know.
Yeah.
While Vin's... I'll get into that later in the show, too. While Vin's percentage rating is the hallmark and backbone of the podcast, it is still enjoyable to get a 1 or 2 shoe rating variation occasionally. This latest episode, finishing up Western Month, was very good. We watched The Cowboys a few months ago on the Western station Grit and thought it was a good movie. Vinny, we're surprised of your praise for those kid actors, giving your disdain for most performances. But we could not agree more that this motion picture. But we could not agree more with this motion picture. Tom's movie backstory was also excellent between the Duke and these boys. We have in the past. Oh, here we go. We have in the past asked for some more comedies on your episodes.
Oh, I think I still owe That Thing You Do,
which are regrettably still such a small percentage of the films reviewed. May we suggest an Adam McKay director deep dive?
Okay.
Step Brothers is rated on the website, but there are also so many more. Maybe you can put that on your many lists to watch. In the meantime, since Fred Astaire February has been completed, we are looking forward to Will Ferrell February. Thanks in advance. Keep up the great work, and always we wish you the best and look forward to future episodes. Glenn and Carol R.
Oh, well, thank you so much. And, I can't say I want to dedicate all of February to Will Ferrell.
We brought up the Adam McKay thing before when we did the, who's the guy that we did?
No.
Wow. That's so hilarious we can't remember it. It was, what were even the movies? Wait, no. It was the 40-year-old virgin.
Yeah, why can't I think of his name? It's been such a long day.
While we think about that, I actually skipped a section here. I think it's kind of important for Glenn Carroll. They also say we have we are nearing director status soon, and hopefully we'll get some comedy reviews prior to this. What will the movie be? A must-watch from us. That Thing You Do? Wild Hogs? Who knows?
Wild Hogs! Oh my God!
That's what he says. Keep up the great work. And everything like that. So they are approaching director status too.
Yeah, absolutely.
Which is huge. That's such a big deal.
Yeah, and we can't express how grateful we are for your engagement, just even listening, and giving feedback to the developing of the show. I mean, truly, you've both been from the beginning, so we can't thank you enough, especially in kind of giving some insight. Tom and I, we're in the weeds here. We're in the trenches with it, so it's hard to track what it feels like moment to moment, especially when we're just focusing on, hey, what's the next week? What's the next movies? Moving on. So that's great to hear that these kind of developing actions or these aspects are developing.
Yeah, and I like the fact that, by the way, Judd Apatow.
Oh, my God.
I don't know how I could forget.
Thank you.
Adam McKay would be good, an Adam McKay film study.
Please edit how long that pause was. Please.
No, it's good. Thank you so much for the week. And it is good. I mean, they've listened to every single, your listeners of all the episodes, Glenn and Carol are they ended with. So, that's a huge deal. We've had people from the beginning, this small group of people that have just been enjoying it. Mm-hmm. They've been producing like crazy, and it's awesome. You're about to be a director or have a directorship, which is a total of $500 donated in.
Yeah.
That's huge. That's a big, big deal.
And a movie at gunpoint.
Waiting. Just waiting in the corner there. So basically, folks, if you're new here and wondering what's going on, this is our producer segment. This is where we take a time to thank the producers of the episode that we're on now. So how you become a producer is when you donate into the show. Vin and I are going out the value for value model. We're not doing an advertised base here, so we're not going to shove advertising down your throat in the podcast or on the site. We're not going to have payment walls or tier structures, or we're not subscription-based. It's all value for value. So are you listening to the podcast, enjoying the website, visiting it? And are you into movies more now than what you were a year ago or before you started listening to us? We look at it as that's value in your pocket. Can you send us value back in our pocket? So you head to the dailyratings.com and you go to the donations tab, and then through your monetary support, you become an actual legitimate producer of the Daily Ratings. Because just like in Hollywood, when you financially support a project, you become a producer of the project. When you produce, just like Glenn and Carol this week, you can write in a producer note, and you can email that to us at tom.vin@thedailyratings.com. Just email us that, and it could be your producer note of anything. Questions, comments, critiques, suggestions. We love it all. It's a through line to you. So the point of this producer segment, not only to acknowledge you, not only to say thanks, but also we care about what you have to say. So Glenn and Carol, you are executive producer of 148. You are godfathers this week with a $95 donation, which is huge.
Huge.
And because we don't really talk about it much on the podcast, because we only have so many producers, we're so young, people are still catching on to the value for value thing. Becoming a director, it's on there on the site as well. If you donate $500 to the Daily Ratings, and that's any amount of donations,
over
big
the
or small,
lifetime of donations
exactly.
as well.
If you total $500, we like to think of you as a director now. So you can pick a name. We will address you as director. This would be Director Glenn, Director Carol, whatever. They can just pick a funny name if they want to be, I don't know, whatever they want to be.
Yeah.
The Director of Comedies, we will call you the Director of Comedies. But you get a title change. We acknowledge that. And you'll also get a little gift bag, Daily Ratings gift bag.
Yep.
You also get to choose one movie of any movie that you want for Vin to watch, and he has to watch it.
Yeah.
So with all the suggestions that we get, even of our own personal lives, people suggesting us movies, it's like, hey, the only way to truly get it in, $500, and even if he's about it or not, Vin will watch that film.
Yeah. At gunpoint.
At $500, man, that is a huge, huge amount.
Absolutely.
And we appreciate it so much. Glenn and Carol are great. No, I'm sorry, I stumbled my way through it. I should have expanded the text a little bit more. But great note. Thank you so much. You're executive producers for episode 148. And folks listening, if you want to be a producer for episode 149, just head to thedailyratings.com and go to that producers tab. Again, real quick, you can donate whichever way you want. If you want to go through PayPal or Venmo, credit or debit, even if you're in the podcasting 2.0, we do accept Satoshis. Any way there is to donate, we've got it there for you. So thank you so much. All right, Vin, with that, let's keep it going. We're going to our now in theaters film. We're getting away from Ridley Scott, and we're getting to more of, this is becoming really a director's franchise.
Yeah.
Because it's been given to 3 other directors.
Yep.
Right? And now it's giving to Fede Alvarez.
Yep. And that's going back to just Covenant. That's where a bit salty that it wasn't given to Blomkamp back in 2015 to 2017.
Because he could have put his flair on it too.
Yeah,
which is kinda cool.
Absolutely.
So this film is called Alien Romulus. Again, director Fede Alvarez. We are in between Alien and Aliens, so we're no longer in the complete prequel. You can set this up however much. I don't know if you want to touch on Alien at all, where we end off, or
not really.
Right.
I think it's self-explanatory in the sense that, again, there are like 80-year gaps between the original 4 movies. So this just takes place in between them. It will be something that I'm split on as far as like this is very much an Alien for a new generation. Still has plenty of nostalgia callbacks in how legacy sequels spit out of Hollywood nowadays.
Okay. All right. So with that, I agree with that. Initially, I was just like, well, maybe we should run through Alien a little bit, catch people up. After watching this, this could be anywhere in the Alien universe almost.
Absolutely.
It's really its own story, and you don't really need to be all that caught up. So, Alien Romulus, just get into it. We'll take it back and forth.
Well, Tom, this has gotten more hype than I was ever expecting. And I'll fully admit you can see that in us not doing a big Alien special with all 7 movies. Though maybe that's not an excuse because clearly you got the work done, not even earlier this year, but you got it done again. So I got no excuse there. But between the PR team really drilling home this practical effects angle and the delightful news Ridley Scott wouldn't be directing 2 films again this year, I couldn't help but fall into some of the hype as well. Sadly, conflicted is one of the words that just kind of overwhelms my thoughts about this film. At many moments, I thought this could really be one of the best Alien sequels I could ask for, especially around VFX, style, and themes.
Right.
Other times it feels like it's chock full of studio notes, like a checkbox of things that are needed in an Alien movie for a newer generation, and almost as if they weren't confident what they were otherwise successfully pulling off in this movie. Let's talk about a little bit of our director, Fede Alvarez. When I heard the news that he was tapped to direct this, surprisingly, I wasn't too upset, despite him having some low scores on the site. We covered 2 of his films so far, both pretty bad, unfortunately. First being The Girl in the Spider's Web from 2018. We gave that a whopping 35%. Without a doubt being the low point of the Millennium series, or better known as the Girl with the series. And also a coincidental thread to Numi Rapace from Prometheus.
Yeah, very good, yeah.
The next was Evil Dead, the gritty remake attempt of the series in 2013. Despite a small fan resurgence online for the film, I didn't see the hype and gave it a 40%. But it's key to why I had faith in him. Evil Dead 2013 may have felt like the series' tone got washed out, but it couldn't possibly be further from having an issue with gore. That film is frankly a benchmark for practical effects work, and where I started to see some promise jumping forward to Alien. After watching this as well, I also see similarities in his cast of young, scrappy characters, which might be a secret ingredient to his brand of slasher. That it's usually kind of inconsequential cast, but they're all young. They all have maybe little to lose. Nonetheless, they're put into this scenario. But for a director that seems to, unfortunately, taint the franchises he's pulled for, my genuine hope was to finally see Fade's style matched with an IP that could take full advantage of it. The lethality of the xenomorph, the gore of a chest burster. That is where I think his talent matched with wonderful VFX work in this film. I feel like this is a huge movie for any sci-fi horror fan that likes set design, that likes practical effects, and I'm happy to say, as far as that press around the film, absolutely behind it 100%. This was a excellent looking movie for those iconic alien visuals. Alien Romulus takes place between the events of the original masterpiece Alien 1979 and before the action-fueled sequel Aliens in 1986. Gone are the heady themes of creation, which lets this stand properly as the slasher in space it was always meant to be. We follow a ragtag group of young adults who live on a mining planet, seemingly conscripted into service of their corporate overlords, good old Weyland-Yutani. This was really one of my favorite aspects about the story. The writing takes the usual implied evil of Weyland, and instead of us seeing it through the eyes of scientists or professionals, we see it through who is impacted most by it, the workers. And the planet they are on is a generational mining colony where all of their parents have died from work-related disease, yet they have to rely on Weyland as a corporation in a matter not too different than indentured servants, with their work term being extended at a whim. In desperation to escape their working hell, the group takes a shot at scrapping a derelict space station found in outer orbit named Romulus. The only issue with the plan is that there seems to be a decaying aspect to the station's system, but once they enter, problems will multiply as rapidly as the xenomorph itself. I think there's a lot of good things going for this film, and if anything, like best in the series aspects in the beginning sections of this. I really like this angle of the characters. I like that they're young for a reason as well. They're young because all their parents are dead because of the mining incidents. The little things like that I was very impressed with in the beginning half of this. Casting-wise, this rounds out an incredible year for the young gun, Kaylee Spaney. She was arguably the lead actress in both Priscilla and Civil War, and pretty solid here. I don't know. What are your thoughts on her?
In this movie?
Yeah.
Because I didn't watch Priscilla, and I have not seen Civil War yet. That's going to be like a catch me up for the end of the film, end of the year. Kaylee Spaney, I was blown away by Kaylee Spaney in this film.
Really?
I am on the Spaney train big time. I couldn't believe how well she took up the new role of the new
Ripley.
Ripley.
Yep.
I mean, she crushed the film. They did visual cues to kind of tie her to that character as well.
Yep.
And I was blown away with her. I was very impressed. I can't wait to see her in more. She did it. And my biggest thing was, what's the actress name of Ripley? Why can't I so bad with names?
Sigourney Weaver.
Right. So she was 28 for Alien, but she actually appears a little bit older. She kind of comes across like she's maybe young 30s.
Yeah.
Kaylee Spaney's 26. She looks like she could pass for 22 or 21.
Sure.
And she's shorter. She's like 5'1". And to me, I felt like the character needed to be a little bit older. I know we're dealing with kids, and yet somehow she did such a good job.
Yeah.
I found her incredibly believable when we just went through two films where no one was believable.
Sure.
And was very happy to see it. I can't praise her enough in this film.
Yeah, that's great. I agree. I think especially with some of those design cues relating her to Ripley.
Yeah.
Whether that be how she dresses or even just kind of like attitude.
Certain hero
as well.
shots as well.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Folks, if there is a theme to this week, though, it's that robots will kind of steal the show. Talk to anyone that sees this film, and they will say that one of the best things is seeing David Johnson's performance as the glitchy android Andy. This was a real surprise. David Johnson does not have really like a super notable acting career. He's been in some like TV stuff.
Yeah.
Nothing that I really recognize. Definitely a sleeper hit. It was something that I was surprised the type of nuance he was able to bring to this android character, and even how that android character was written beyond just like, oh, maybe they're evil, you know. So there was depth there in a really enjoyable way.
Yeah, I think for a synthetic, for an android character, he has to do a lot in this film.
Yeah.
He's given quite a wave. Yeah, just a large spectrum of what he actually needs to do, and I think he does a pretty good job with it. I saw this with producer Sean.
Yes.
And he was not a fan with him.
At all.
No, I won't say at all, but for a little while, not having any of it. I liked him a lot.
Yeah.
I still think, for me, Kaylee Spaney just stole the show. To me, when I think of this movie, I see her.
Interesting.
Especially because it's just so tied to Ripley, and Ripley is Alien, you know?
Yep.
So, but David Johnson really... He did a good job
Yeah.
with what he had to do here.
Yeah, because I mean, we won't go into spoilers, but there is kind of a dual role he has to play. That the actual acting performance evolves quite a bit.
Right. And much like, I'm sorry, just like a Fassbender too. Like he's coming off the shoes of Fassbender, who was the only good part about Prometheus and Alien Covenant.
Yeah, absolutely. That's why I said alternate title for this week is Androids Get It Done. They're the mover of these plots. The rest of the crew, I would say, is slightly feeling lacking, but not in an unusual way. Like I mentioned, Alvarez seems to purposefully make his supporting characters surface level because I think he understands he's making a slasher. The one piece kind of missing from us studying his directing career is the two films Don't Breathe, which is his own original IP.
Right.
I think very similarly has young kids put with like an old man that, you know, in a house. That's the slasher premise. So I haven't seen those films, so I won't speak too much on it, but I feel like there's an intentionality to... We're not getting a huge amount of development with these characters, and kind of where I felt lacking with the kids.
So I am usually I can't stand kids cast, like teen cast. I'm just not about it. A lot of it has to do with in horror films too, where it's like, let's all go into the room that has no way out. And the bad guy's going to come in. Like I can't stand it.
Bingo.
Much like Twisters that we covered, especially in the beginning when we're learning that young cast and everyone's stereotypical and it makes my skin crawl. So with this one we have that, but it's not horrible.
Yeah.
So I wasn't like upset with the kids as much as I could be. So I agree with you. It was a little bit lacking. But for me, the bar is so low that to me it's almost a step up from what we're used to.
Yeah.
I also like that the kids weren't raging idiots. They were all a bit competent.
Yep.
And willing to take charge in some matter or in certain aspects.
Yep.
And at least that was good to see, where, again, we didn't have people running around and, again, just, let's hide in the room with no way out in the closet.
It's a great point because I feel like the deaths of the last two films came from just idiocy, where this comes from maybe a mix of arrogance, maybe a mix of like being too cocky, being, kind of blissfully unaware because they're young, not taking the situation seriously, where there's just like no excuse for a scientist designed for a lifelong mission to step on a black mushroom puff. So
now, again, still not great. I'm not going to go praise that secondary cast, but let's just say they don't tank it.
Yeah,
maybe we could say.
I think there was still something a little bit missing there for me, but I feel like it fits it a little bit better, just a tiny bit better. The most unique thing about this story, though, is, again, this angle it takes with the dystopian capitalism of Weyland-Yutani and how that's almost a villain itself.
Oh, yeah.
I'm going to be bold and say kind of equal to the Alien. There is an element here that there's kind of a parallel threat running side by side, and it's within these corporate interests. Go ahead.
Would you say that's not new to this film, though, you would say? I mean, that really starts with Aliens, no?
True. It's true to the entire franchise. I think, like, it was just revitalized in this film, especially coming off of Prometheus and Covenant.
Okay.
And it's odd because Wayland, as far as a corporate interest, especially for Prometheus, is like very much in the story. Even to your point about you wanted more of that. You wanted more origins of like, where is this, mission directive coming from? Here, I feel like it played as more clearly just like a threat to the story. And I feel like that's at least a little bit more refreshed coming off of like at least these last two films. In these prequel movies this week, our crew has usually been highbrow scientists or company assets. The original films, on the other hand, they match that used future aesthetic with crew members that were forced into hard labor and in space. The way Weyland-Yutani is depicted here is dystopian in a way that I don't think has been really drilled home. Like I said, our main characters are basically indentured service with their working terms extended at will. There is a desperation around this generational mining colony, forced to work in mines that they know will kill them. We feel the dystopia from the people that are impacted by it most. And I feel like that's where I was like, whoa, this is achieving something like really, really genuinely great for the franchise.
It's exploring a little bit more because we're so used to just we're so used to company on ships with a goal or a task or a transport vehicle.
Right.
This we're actually seeing the company operate of what it's actually mining or whatever that town. I'm surprised you liked the beginning so much. I'm surprised you didn't see it as, I could see some people watching and saying, well, this is just opening fodder. Let's get to it now.
Could also be a little slow, I think. I think that's a fair criticism.
The first half an hour.
Yeah. When they're getting up to the space station, it's just kind of like, hey, maybe get me up there. I think I was all right with it because I was digesting these themes and what he was laying down in the writing.
Right.
I think I was also loving just like the visuals. You know, I mean, I feel like that's where
that grungy, matrixy feely.
Yeah. Used future. He hit it home. He hit it out of the park. With this. So. I bring this up again because it plays into how tension is cranked up in the runtime. In moments that they are entering the station, I wouldn't blame an audience member for saying, why the hell are you going in this haunted house in space? Like, why are you going there? It's a derelict station, going to crash. It's going to crash. What's going on here? But on top of giving a sinister spin to every ounce of Wayland technology on the station, that's where I mean, like, it's almost as equal as a threat of the aliens.
Yeah.
This desperation is decent motivation for everyone to get torn to shreds, ultimately. I feel like if there's anything worth it in that first 30 minutes, it's that it's laying down that all these characters are desperate, and we know why they're desperate. It's not having to be told to us later on then. So that's where I was really liking it. On the other hand, folks, it really just doesn't really give me any joy that for every inspired detail like this in the story, the film will have studio notes ruling its second half.
I'm going to disagree with this part.
Okay.
Yeah. The only reason why I don't think this is studio notes.
Okay.
Because I think I know where you're going with this. From the little research that I did,
okay.
What I really got from, again, small amount of research is Fede Alvarez and the guy who wrote it with him are unbelievable lovers of this film, of this franchise.
Yeah.
And grew up with it and like have a deep passion with it, relationship with it. He was also in talks with Ridley Scott, getting notes from Ridley. But I think this came from lover from a fan.
Sure. That makes sense. Fede has also said similar things about that Evil Dead remake, wanting to capture the original horror he's felt when experiencing the original film. So I totally get that. I feel like as a result, though, it does come out much weaker at the end, at least from my watch.
Okay.
On the surface, things like one-liners or specific callbacks are peppered all over the place. The worst is a shameless callback to the most famous line from Cameron's Aliens, which loses any sort of meaning with how it's used here. However, much more damaging is an inclusion of one series character that I would say just derails so much of what this film built up. For once this week, I'm referring to a robot character that is not Michael Fassbender, but maybe in hindsight, I would have enjoyed it more if it was.
Oh, okay, yeah.
My issue is with how this character is used in the story, on top of it being a little too cartoonishly evil from the get-go. There doesn't seem to be much thought put into how they would do certain things in the plot. And again, to me, studio notes or not, it just felt like needless callbacks to the series. This movie was going so unique in its own direction, while still being true to what an Alien film is. You know, whenever they feel exposition is needed or they want these tiebacks to the original movies, this character will just pop up on the near screen, feeling closer to like a video game tutorial than a character with stakes. Also, not to get too in the weeds on this, but this is a universe that CRT screens are like the latest advancement in technology. Like, they probably never even invented Bluetooth in the Alien universe. Yet this character just is downright all-powerful over every piece of technology, even, especially when he needs to for plot reasons. But honestly, that nitpick aside, I can't help but feel that this character's introduction, it marked where the film started to slope a little bit downward for me, where I was like, man, I just kind of wish they just weren't a part of it at all. I don't know. What are your thoughts on that?
So, I'll give my general take of the Easter eggs and the nods to the
sure.
franchise and stuff. So, one, there are some one-lines that are taken that I could definitely do without.
Yeah.
Me not having the supreme attachment that you and a lot of you alien heads kind of have. Like, I rolled at one, which is the most obvious one.
Sure.
Everything else I didn't mind. Yeah, so there's a lot of artifacts in the movie that are callbacks, that are reused in the franchise and stuff. I don't mind that because I think there's a difference of tasteless fan service to like content respect. And I think there's a lot of respect, and I feel like there's love for the franchise. And so all these little elements that are here, even some of the shots of Kaylee Spanie's character Rain, I'm cool with how similar it is to the franchise, or using elements of the original Alien and Aliens.
Yeah,
I'm down with that. Some of the lines I can do without. This character, when they show up, I'm happy about it, and I was excited for it.
Okay.
Each time they were in the picture again, it decreased the coolness became like, this is too much. And it was too much.
Yeah.
The exposition dumps were too much, and also it lost the luster. I say, have one scene, give that nod to what is going to make people really happy and everything like that, and connect it back to the old movies, and then move on. He never moves on enough from it.
Yeah.
Just tone it back.
Yeah.
Just tone it back a bit.
I'm with you as well in like the subtle nods of like how she's dressed, for instance. I think that's a great, it's just more of a visual cue.
Yeah.
I feel like that's good. It really just boils down to how this character feels like it's a checkbox.
Yeah.
And it feels like he delivers dialogue that is a checkbox of like, our cast of kid or young adult actors aren't going to be able to unpack, the science behind this or anything like that. It feels like he's also burdened with a lot of like telling us bullshit that just
exposition dumps.
Yeah.
Do you agree that if you just have first meeting and then out, that character's out?
100%. I would be totally fine with it.
That's what I thought it was going to be.
Yeah.
They appear later in the film, and even like producer Sean was literally laughing out loud. At one point,
it's also like this like remote control over any screen they want to use. It's just like
it cheapens it. It cheapens it. Yeah,
it does. It's tough because I feel like I have thoughts on how the visual effects are handled, which basically
the CGI is a little rough too.
Yeah, boils down to like a deep fake. Once again, that's a perfect example of like, I thought this film was as close to flawless as capturing the Alien used future style as possible. Yeah. And then you have moments like that it's just like, why? And detracts from it,
Yeah, I mean, it's the one CGI that looks bad in the film. It's not the best, especially when it's so VFX heavy. It's so just practical effect heavy, and then practical effects absolutely are a knockout. They are so incredible. It does stand out a little bit, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. If anything, it's highlighted. Like we talked about with Prometheus, that dumb actions are side by side with like really smart scenes or really like good-looking visuals. It highlights the dumb sides of this. In this, nowhere near as bad, but it highlights this one implementation and this one character in such a way that just kind of turned me off a little bit. Not necessarily like overtly bad, just turned me off. Why don't we take this moment to talk about the visuals, because this takes a lot of wonderful, wonderful design cues from the latest Alien video game of note, Alien Isolation from 2014, a fantastic game if you've never checked it out. Specifically adopts a few elements that are pulled from the original movie and emphasizes them as kind of a revitalization of this used future look we've talked so much about. There are too many examples to even begin, but screens are strictly staticky, low-tech CRTs. The air ducts are barely functioning, like they're rattling as they're turned on, really sells like this station is not suitable for orbit anymore. Right. I love that as far as like cranking up, like make us feel this ticking clock without like a robot saying, "in so many minutes till the orbit." You know, that's where it really sells it for me. And just like coolant smoke, I cannot overstate the importance of smoke in the original Alien movies. It really is like just like dry ice and like smoke is so key to how these horror scenes are built up, and he nails that. And it's just billowing out of like just random spots in the ship, and it's just, man, it just looks like a steam engine. It's just fantastic. The list really goes on. I have to give some serious props here because I saw this before rewatching our other two movies this week, and I just forgot how much Ridley just didn't even try to go for that style that's in the roots of this. Prometheus and especially Covenant, to a big disappointment. They just like don't try. They don't try for those styles. So regardless of who did it first, this is an incredible renaissance of Alien's iconic style and worth checking out for the film alone. I really do believe that. Once again, there is some conflict as far as this one character and how the deepfake kind of CGI is spotlighted on him. It's beating a dead horse. I feel like I have a disappointment with it. I don't think it's enough to kill the film as far as visual effects go.
No, absolutely not.
Yeah,
absolutely not. That character is not in the movie enough. Because everything else looks so good.
Yeah, absolutely.
It really does. Everything looks good in this film.
Yeah,
and it was a joy to see.
Yeah,
the marketing was really hard at letting people know it's practical effects. So they had a high bar to get over, and they did.
Absolutely. Folks, I think the best pitch for this is that it's not exactly a reboot, but it's certainly trying to be an Alien for a newer generation. Would you say that?
Yes. I think this film opens the door for more Alien films to be made, and ones that we love that remind us of Alien and Aliens.
Sure.
I think this is the gateway to that, where Prometheus and Alien Covenant absolutely were not.
You're right.
And I think because they went with a younger cast here, this is definitely, again, to welcome in a new generation.
Yeah, absolutely. It reestablishes foundational qualities of the original films, and through Alvarez's style, captures a new youthful spin on the franchise, just as old as any other horror movie, so kind of in need of that revitalization. Nonetheless, I feel like the film is burdened with its placement in between the original two movies, and you can feel that in the many nostalgia grabs, and that it's just inappropriate, I feel, for this new direction it was going in. Maybe I would have felt different if we covered all 7 movies this week, but regardless of being underprepared, I think the second half gets hijacked in a way that, for me, ruined how fresh it was starting out. For my personal enjoyment, I come back to, once again, the word conflicted. This checks all the boxes and has wonderful, wonderful special effects, if not like series best special effects, but was just missing some sauce. Maybe a reason to care in the cast. Maybe, again, kind of a turn away from what I read as studio notes, but even if it was just a love letter from our director, kind of a little bit tasteless in their inclusion. But certainly that reason wasn't going to come from recognizing something on screen, saying, "Oh, I remember that." No, everything good about this film was what it had going for its own. I feel like it's still very much well worth your time for that reason. We're going to go ahead and give Alien Romulus a 68.
Ooh, okay, 68%. 68%. Okay, we'll take it.
Let me say this much. Tom called me right after he watched this, and it was on cloud 9. And I'll be honest, I felt bad in writing the review because I didn't want to, take the wind out of your sail.
Both producer Sean and Vin were shocked that I came out of this liking this film. I mean, I was so much hotter than producer Sean. I called you immediately, which I almost never do. I mean, we usually
keep it for the podcast.
Save it for the podcast.
Yep.
I mean, I called you. I was pacing in my kitchen. I can't tell you how much I really like this film. I was hot coming out of it. Okay, and. Not that I thought it was flawless, because it wasn't.
Sure.
One thing to note also, the young cast wasn't perfect, but they weren't bad. I wish there was a little bit more problem solving for them, because Kaylee Spaney is a problem solving machine, and I think it could have been. I didn't love that, where it's here's a problem. Hey, Kaylee Spaney's got to fix.
you know the answer, right?
That could have been shared a little bit more.
Sure.
Among the other cast, there were opportunities for that. Otherwise. Listen, I could have even added, give me some more tense moments, give me some more chase scenes, give me some more. I think maybe there was a little bit of downtime, just too much. Other than that, one thing we didn't bring up, and I got to talk about how much I freaking love it, the sound design of this film. The sound, just the noises, the creatures, just the ship itself, and the music, the score and soundtrack that goes on with this film is fantastic.
Yeah.
There's absolute silent moments in the film, and then there's absolutely loud, just banger moments of this film.
Yep.
I love the sound design and the music. Like I can't praise that enough. I love that it felt like I was in a world of. If none of the other Alien movies exist, it's like, wow, yes, we have Aliens, and we have this new film that feels just like those films. This movie feels like those movies. And I love that about it. I love that it kind of takes us back with just giving us a modern picture with great practical effects and things like that.
Yep.
So I can't tell you how hot I was. I mean, the fact that I called you right after.
I can't wait.
I mean, I'll do you one better,
You
Vin.
got to give a Tommy Two-Shoes
Monday night, when I saw this movie again.
No! Whoa!
Now, let me say this. I think watching this a second time.
I don't know if you can say you Alien fans. Clearly, you put in the work. You're got membership dues.
So, let me say that the second watch, first time saw it in fake IMAX.
Okay.
Second time saw it in Dolby.
Ooh, yeah.
Freaking great in Dolby.
Especially for those like bassy synth one, that one track that we talked about. Yeah.
So I think what a second watch with this was what a second watch of Let the Corpses Tan from last week did for you.
Okay.
Where usually the second watch means like,
let me double down.
I freaking love it. So this is getting even better. This was able to tamp down that a little bit.
Okay.
And I was able to sleep. It felt obviously much slower. And I was like, man, there could be a little bit more here. There could be a little bit more. Give me more in Act 2, you know?
Sure.
Overall, I still really like this film for what it was. It's a sci-fi horror. I mean, it's just not for me. Usually, this is not. I like
that's
sci-fi.
Why I'm so shocked.
This is a movie for Vin. That being said, this gets a very positive 2 shoes.
Okay.
Again, for podcast listeners, that's a 2 shoe and a shine. I'm putting a shine on that.
That's a shine.
Those are polished up shoes.
Right.
This is very, very, very close to 2 shoes, 1 lace.
Wow.
The only reason why it's toned back a little bit because I thought it could have been a little bit more. I thought, maybe the one character was in it a bit too much. And it's not that the cast was all electric. They weren't bad.
Yeah.
And that's nice to see. But man, I was so impressed with this.
That's great.
I was so impressed with the film, and the 2 shoes and a polish. That's some people might think that's low. It's not. That's quite a good score, especially for what this film is with me.
Yeah, and that's where I don't know. After our call, the anxiety of writing these reviews on such a beloved franchise for me, it increased because I feel like if this. In regards to like what I was saying, like a Alien for a newer generation, if this was your hook for the best parts of the franchise, whether it's visuals or design or anything, the horror even, I feel like that's mission accomplished, and I feel like that makes it worth even some of the issues I have with the film.
Exactly, and it is mission accomplished for the most part, and that's why I got to tell you, there's 7 Alien films. Technically 9 if you count the AVPs.
Yep.
And this is definitely, this is easily top 3, if not top 2.
Wow. Interesting.
With Alien and Aliens.
Wow.
Yeah, this is right up there.
I it's been so long since I've seen 3 and Resurrection. I think by default it may be for me as well.
Right.
So
and I go back and forth on Alien and Aliens. That's not as clear cut as for me that it is
sure,
for you.
Yeah.
But even this is right up there. I mean, it's almost just I look at them almost the same in different ways.
Yeah.
Really enjoyed the film. Really, really liked it. Saw it twice. I mean.
It's great. It's great.
I was excited to tell you that.
Wow. I love that. I guess my burning question after watching all these films twice, no less, you know, for a lot of them, what are your thoughts on the Xenomorph? Like, are you scared by it? Yeah.
Xenomorph is an awesome character.
Yeah.
The way it looks, the design of it, Xenomorph is freaking awesome.
Yeah. I personally went down a rabbit hole and just looking at a lot of the behind-the-scenes stuff for H.R. Geiger, or Giger, however you pronounce it, for his original designs.
Yeah.
And especially where so much of that is pulled on from Ridley Scott for the engineers, because that's all Giger's original work as well. That mix of, madness, metal, and flesh. Man, I really just had such an appreciation for these design elements that I think that's where like Romulus really did do it for me, in that it feels like a breath of fresh air in the same chamber.
It is, because if you went and watched 3 and then the 4th film, Resurrections, and then when you go jump to Prometheus and Alien Covenant, all of them are lacking.
Yep.
I think Geiger ended up, he hated Resurrections, the 4th film.
Yep.
And the 3rd one is when they get into CGI, where everything is CGI, and it's just like, oh my God. So, this brings it back.
Yeah.
Brings it back, definitely.
Absolutely.
All right, Vin, anything you want to touch on? Anything for next week? Anything to wrap up? Roll credits?
Well, next week is Blink Twice. Yeah, we'll see. Channing Tatum in an evil role. I guess we can see what that works with. But excited to cover The Crow. The new one doesn't look great, but I have been down a rabbit hole of research for that original Crow.
Okay, wow.
From Brandon Lee to O'Barr, the original author of The Crow. Very tragic story, but like really fascinating production stuff. So,
it is. Okay. All right. So stay tuned next week. The new Channing Tatum one and The Crow. Yeah, it's going to be interesting. We'll see. But okay, Vin, thank you so much for watching these, for stopping by. Vin, we'll go down this one more time. We have Prometheus with a 44%, Alien Covenant with a 59%, and Alien Romulus with a 68%, and a 2 shoes polished up. Folks, thank you so much for listening, and we'll see you next time on the Daily Ratings Podcast. And hey, if you enjoyed the podcast, if you would, give us a good rating, or get the word out and tell a friend about us. And just a reminder that the Daily Ratings is completely producer-supported. We want to stay away from advertising, and we don't want to have any paywalls or tier structures or subscriptions. It's all just value for value. So, are you finding value in any of the things that we're doing here at the Daily Ratings? Then become a producer and donate whatever amount of value that is. Just go to the donations tab on thedailyratings.com, and while you're there, be sure to check out the massive amount of films that Vince has rated. So thanks so much, everybody. We'll see you next week on the Daily Ratings Podcast.